All right, we're live. Welcome to Duran Live number 29. How's everyone doing? If you can hear me, let me know in the chat. We hope everyone is doing well. How is everyone doing out there? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me, if the sound is good, if the picture is good. We're waiting on Alexander. Once again, it seems like the secret forces, the deep state, the MI6, CIA, FBI, Greek Secret Service.
Or the fact his wife isn't there.
Yeah, something is happening, and Alexander can't get on, and we're waiting for him. We can see his he's trying to get on the live, but something's not happening. Anyway, Rosebud, thank you, loud and clear, Alex. Good to have you here. Hello from Switzerland, from Sweden, Pax Bella. How you doing? Hello, Trey. We'll get to that question. All right, Vasya, hello. Terry, hello.
These names are familiar.
Teddy,
I think
yeah.
This is our core crowd here.
We have a good core crowd. Goberwala, how you doing? Henry, good to see you. Teddy from Denmark. All right. Jan from Ontario, Melbourne. All right, how's everyone doing out there? We hope you're having a good start to the week. Hello, N.A. McIntosh. Love you guys. Thanks again. Thank you very much. We love you guys. Partisan from Belarus. All right, nice to see you. Dover, UK, Alabama. Hello, Alex from the UK, from Bangkok, from Virginia. Hello, Liam. I lived in Virginia, Peter, for many years. Many years. Fairfax and McLean, VA. All right, good to have everybody here. We're waiting for Alexander, and on cue, there he is. Alexander, we see you. Please
can
say
you hear
something.
me? Can you hear me? I'm having to do this via my mobile phone.
Okay.
We've tried multiple computers and nothing works.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if the sound and the image are unclear, but clearly there is some major problem here.
Okay, Alexander, I just have one suggestion. Can you just slightly turn your phone to an angle, because it looks like you're preparing yourself for sainthood with the light above your head. There you go. A little bit left. A little turn. You can. It's a little bit more. Okay.
All right. Carolyn says we can hear you, Oracle Alex. Alexander, we hear you actually really well, and the picture's good.
Right.
All right. So now we are all on board. So let's get this thing rolling. In Moscow, the one, the only, the great one, Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Peter, how are you doing this Monday?
Oh, I was taking, RT took me for new clothes shopping at Brooks Brothers. Of course, I'm in a good mood.
What'd you get?
They have to do all of the fittings. Okay, so the tailor has them right now. So I'm going to surprise everyone. You'll know when on Crosstalk you'll see me. I wear, these are my clothes, and when I am at work, I wear clothes that RT purchases for me. So you'll notice they're nice. They're sharp. They're nice. Real nice.
All right. Hello from West Yorkshire, God's own country. Hello, Simone. How are you? Noreen, Alexander, we can see you and hear you. We can hear you and see you. Great. All right. Alexander, the Oracle from London via mobile. Alexander, how are you doing?
Well, I'm all right, except, of course, that I'm via mobile. Nothing I can do about that. As I said, we spent about 30 minutes struggling with these things, but here I am.
Okay, good.
I think the UK doesn't want you to discuss the Brexit stuff that's going on. So
maybe right. Maybe right.
And Peter has a special guest. Peter, that's Skippy?
That's Buddy.
That's Buddy. All right. So we have Alexander, Peter, and Buddy. Now everyone is here and ready to get live chat 29 going. Let's begin with a couple super chats. Peter, super chat from Penguins fan. When did the Chechen war begin? Who did it and how did it happen? They say that Putin and the FSB bombed the Moscow apartments in '99 for a pretext to bomb Chechnya. And Valley S, thank you for your super chat as well. Peter.
Well, the question is basically making a reference to what is called the Second Chechen War or conflict or anti-terrorist action. The 1999 claim that Putin, as a head of the FSB, orchestrated the bombing of apartments in Moscow and across the country. This is a claim that some people like Alexander Litvinenko made when we know what happened to him. it's never been proven. It is a supposition that is used all the time. There's no evidence to back it up. Yes, I mean, the Yeltsin acquitted Russia very badly in 1996. From 1996 to 1999, Chechnya was, in a sense, a independent actor outside the control of the Russian Federation, and it became a jihadist state. You could buy slaves on the square in Grozny. It was an ISIS state. That's the term we would use today. And when Putin became president, he started what they called here the anti-terrorist operation, and they rightfully and effectively wiped out that jihadist state. And much to the chagrin of the people like Brzezinski and others that saw Chechnya as a foothold to get into the Russian Federation to start breaking it up. They had no love for the Chechen people whatsoever. It was just the conduit. And that effort was foiled. And Putin is greatly appreciated and thanked, because I'll tell you, in 1999, I was here. And when Putin said we need to clean, and I won't use the language that he used, we'll find him in the outhouse and we'll destroy him there if we have to. And there was a lot of trepidation here, because what had happened in the 90s during the first conflict was horrific, because the Russian military acquitted itself very badly. Very bad. It reminded people of, 1940 against when the Soviet Union went to war against Finland, and the Finns really gave the Soviets a terrible bloody nose, which of course Hitler thought, well, see, you see, the Soviet Union is a pushover. So, and the same supposition was believed in 1999. He said Russia's military force is defunct. It can't even defend its own proper territory within its borders. And then in short order, these terrorists, essentially what they were wiped out. And then Kadyrov was, I remember when Kadyrov Sr. was killed, his son Ramzan took over, and there was a reconciliation process. I've been to Grozny. The public relations spokesperson for Kadyrov Jr., when I was there, he said, "Here, come on, I want to show you something," because we were waiting to meet him. And he said, he showed me this broken down wall. And I said, "Well, what's this?" "It's a broken down wall." He said, "That's the last of the ruins." And I said, "What?" Because Grozny was completely flattened, okay? And they completely rebuilt it. It's actually a quite beautiful little city right now. And the quid pro quo is that, they make sure that Grozny is well funded, and Ramzan can make sure that it keeps the place quiet, and it is quiet. And when's the last time you heard the word Chechnya? Okay, I guess on this podcast.
Yeah, good question. Alexander, you have something to
add
add
on
on that?
add something?
And Alexander, real quick, from Beth M, she says, "You're always looking dapper, but fix your tie a little bit."
Yeah,
a little crooked.
right. Yes. Well, I've been rather flustered moving from one computer to another, and switching on and off computers has been rather a bother.
We noticed.
Okay, so if you straighten out your tie, and then you can jump in on the FSB question.
I'm going to say very simply this. I have looked into this business of the apartment bombings exhaustively. There is no question about who did it. It was not Putin, and it was not the FSB. It was these violent jihadi groups that were carrying out a violent jihad against Russia in the Caucasus. All the people who were involved in those bombings were identified. Most of them, several of them, were captured. They were put on trial, and those trials ended in convictions which have not been challenged in the European Court of Human Rights or anywhere else. Moreover, the two jihadi leaders at the time, Shamil Basayev and a man called Kitab, who was a Saudi, actually were caught bragging about the fact that they'd caused those apartment bombings. The apartment bombing theory that it was all done by Putin and Yeltsin and the FSB is a conspiracy theory, and that is all it is. When you're dealing with violent jihadis, they are perfectly capable of launching indiscriminate attacks against civilians, as we saw on 9/11, as we've seen repeatedly in Iraq and Syria and Libya and in lots of other places. That's what happened with the apartment bombings. It's happened on other occasions in Russia also, and there is no reason to go beyond that.
All right, let's get to some questions that people sent before we did the live. Pedro Costa, hey guys, I'm French. Please spread the word. We are in a dictatorship. Help us. We will get to some Yellow Vests questions today. We had the Yellow Vest 17 that took place. So Pedro, don't worry. We will tackle the Yellow Vests and Macron and what's happening there. Peter from Harry Smith, it occurs to me that Trump is asking every country with U.S. bases to pay 5x more in probably a double bluff. He wants everyone else to ask the U.S. to leave so nobody can blame him for shuffling them all. What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting theory, but I don't think John Bolton will buy it. It's basically turned into a racket. Okay, I mean, this is exactly how the mafia operates. You know, we'll protect your pizzeria, but you have to pay us $5,000 a week. Okay, and then we'll make sure no one else does this to you. No one else will shake you down. I mean, it's a classic shakedown operation. What I find really interesting about it is two things here. We might find ourselves in a situation, or actually the Germans, for example, and the French and the Italians and others, and the Japanese. So maybe they will have domestic referendum and say, well, wait, do we really want these bases here? Okay, and throw it right back at Trump. Because it's very clear from public opinion polls that I read last summer, the vast majority, well, certainly a majority of Germans would like the Americans to leave. Okay, the war has been over for 7 decades, and I think that if Trump really wants to be that brash, then he's gonna push them to the position where they'll say, well, maybe we really don't need you here, and maybe you should leave. And then we'll see, then the Americans say, well, we won't leave. And then they lose the legitimacy for being there in the first place. It's a fascinating story. And the question is great because it really could be a bluff. But the fact that, what is it? We've said here 2 or 3 countries in NATO pay what they're supposed to, the 2% of their GDP. I mean, now you're going to tell these countries you have to pay even more, and they're going to say, it's, I don't know. What do you think the Greeks would react to that, Alex?
We already pay our share, and that's
that's right. But
we would be like Germany, pay.
Yeah, but that's only because of Turkey.
Yeah, okay? That's because of Turkey. It's exactly.
But I mean,
right.
in this era of austerity, do you think that's top of mind for the
Impossible.
Greeks?
The Greeks couldn't handle it. People would flood the streets, Peter.
No, absolutely.
People would flood the streets literally if they were told to pay more.
But see, this is the interesting. This is a concoction, a very interesting, bizarre mixture of Trump's unilateralism and I'm sorry, Bolton's unilateralism and Trump's America first. And this is a weird hybrid, and it's really coming out in a very bizarre way. Yeah. And I think it's just, again, because Trump thinks so transactional all the time, because he wants to spend more on the American military and gut social programs. His heartline is not going to take that well when they start seeing what he wants to cut. All right. So, but this is just very speaking in Trumpian terms here, and don't underestimate this as part of his 2020 re-election campaign. He really wants to show that he's tough, and what America wants, America will get. Well, that's a nice bumper sticker, but the implications of which would be ultimately would be in favor of what I believe, and that is the total breakdown of NATO. NATO is completely unnecessary, and NATO exists to exist. Its mission is merely to exist. It has nothing to do with security, and Trump is pushing them to that point. Good.
Very well said. From Sam, can you guys research a bit about Ethiopia and the city of Addis Ababa, to be specific, and do a video about it? The country is heading for civil war. We'll look at it. We'll research it, but we also want to say there was a very tragic accident that did happen, and our hearts go out to the families and of the victims. It was a tragedy, folks. So a prayer for the people in Ethiopia. Alexander from Caroline. super chat. In light of Rachel Maddow's claims, China and Russia can compromise any electrical grid anytime, anywhere with precision. What do you make of Maduro's claim a U.S. cyber attack is behind the Caracas blackouts?
I think it's very plausible. I don't know that it's true. I mean, the Venezuelan infrastructure is very run down because of the economic crisis. But the United States has said that all options are on the table where Venezuela is concerned. They have a history of using making cyber attacks against Iran. They've talked about targeting Russian infrastructure. Why shouldn't they have targeted Venezuela's infrastructure, given that they're trying to engineer a regime change there? It seems to me highly plausible, and if I'm going to say it frankly, I think it's likely.
Yeah, and we can't discount the fact that it was internal sabotage in the interest of the opposition. So, I mean, it's a combination of both there. I mean, but the Marco Rubio's reaction to it all is very telling, isn't it? It's very telling. It's very telling.
Alexander, you almost came up twice there.
Wow, you say Marco Rubio's name and things go nuts here.
Nuts.
I think your computer was trying to log on for you.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Plants, thank you for your $2 super chat. Ed Peter from E. Ray Reichley super chat. I have seen reports that the EU has lost over $100 billion due to the food sanctions imposed by Russia. These sanctions have helped Russia develop its own food industry. Do you ever see Russia lifting these sanctions? Good question.
A few of them might be. The foreign ministry has hinted that it would be very selective in what sanctions that it would lift. But in like, for example, Polish apples, which, by the way, are quite good. I think my reading of the foreign ministry's position is that the Poles have lost the Russian market for good. So there, there's a cause and effect relationship here, okay, like in physics. And if you want to use food security as a political pawn, and when it's being pushed by a country that takes no loss whatsoever, i.e. the United States, its ally, Poland, which wants to host American troops, they will pay the penalty for it. So I'm on the record of repeatedly saying is that these sanctions, like on agricultural sanctions, I'm absolutely for it, because before this whole sanction campaign started, you would buy Swiss cheese, okay, or French cheese, Belgian chocolates. Now the Russians have made their own, and they're quite good. I mean, it took them a couple of years, but their quality went up. And you know why? It's because of the sanctions. So Russia comes out on top. Russia comes out on top. Self-sufficiency in food, maybe not very specific, your favorite specific things. Okay, you'll have to fly to a capital and pick it up, I guess. But other than that, and the populace itself is quite satisfied to see the improvement in their own food quality. So it's a win-win for Russia. It's a lose-lose for countries like Poland, and unfortunately Austria. And because Austria is a very big dairy producer, and they really like the Russian market. I don't know what will happen to them.
Alexander, you want to say something about that?
Yes, I mean, the one thing I must say is that, of course, the food sanctions that Russia has imposed on the EU are technically counter-sanctions. So the Russians have said that if the EU lifts its sanctions on Russia, then the Russians will lift their counter-sanctions on the food imports.
But no, but very specifically, they've made it very clear that will be very selective. It won't be across the board.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I think that basically they will be extremely reluctant to lift any of these sanctions for the reasons that Peter said. They've been so good for Russia overall.
All right, staying on sanctions from Buckshot. Thoughts about the Turkish-Russian S-400 deal and the possible sanctions to Turkey by USA, Alexander?
Well, I think this is a momentous event, because it's quite clear now, I think, that the Turks are going to go ahead with this deal, no matter what the US says. Apparently, the S-400s are now ready for delivery. It's expected they'll be delivered and be operational by October. So it looks like no F-35s for Turkey, no Patriot missiles for Turkey, with the Turks now talking about buying Su-35 fighters from Russia and possibly Su-57s when they become available. Now, I think that is a huge step, and I think it is an extraordinary misjudgment and misstep by the United States. Because
Absolutely.
I mean, what they're doing, in effect, is they're driving Turkey away. And given what a pivotally important country Turkey is to NATO, with the biggest military in NATO, or at least the biggest army in NATO, after the United States. I'm not saying it's the most powerful, but it's the second biggest. I think that is a huge mistake at multiple levels. But that's what they've decided to do, and that's where things are going.
Well, and really, you know, looking at the future, let's be clear, folks. Turkey isn't going to leave NATO anytime soon. I mean, it will have its list, and it's going to be, if they leave, they're going to want something from the region, their allies, or tentative allies, with Russia, for example. They're going to want something, all right. But this is, the very nature of NATO is changing right now because of Turkey's attitude towards the rest of the alliance. Turkey is so very critical to the United States because it is the fig leaf. Turkey, being a member of NATO, is the fig leaf the U.S. uses to be able to express its power through the greater Middle East. Without Turkey, it's a different game, and this is a very critical point. But you don't see any of this on CNN or MSNBC or even Fox. You know, here we go. The American public is sleepwalking as major geopolitical shifts are occurring right before our eyes. Good question.
Absolutely. Great question. And Peter from Courtney, Chelsea Manning is back in prison for refusing to testify to the grand jury about WikiLeaks, while end of the free home of the brave, jail's whistler. But no, none of the whistlers have gone to prison for their war crimes. What do you make of Chelsea Manning going back into prison, Peter?
I think that Manning is taking a principled stance, and I support that full-heartedly. They actually want to speak to Manning about things that happen that have nothing to do with Russiagate. It's about the original dump that Manning made to WikiLeaks, and she's made it very clear that she's said everything she wants to say about that. I mean, she was at 7 years in solitary confinement. She's taking a principled stance, and it shows the pettiness, the absolute pettiness of the prosecution. I mean, enough is enough. I mean, I would have thought Manning would have been squeezed of everything. It seems so unnecessary to go through all of this here. And it really shows the really vile, mean side of the justice system. I know that it's because it's dealing with a grand jury that they can only release certain amount of information. I understand that in principle, but I think this is a story of such public importance that I think the public needs to understand why they feel justified in doing this.
And let's not forget, a lot of that was under the Obama administration.
Exactly.
Alexander.
Can I just say, I mean, I find that Chelsea Manning's courage and integrity in this situation leaves me absolutely awed. I mean, you know, that she is refusing to compromise on this and is risking another period in prison after the terrible way she was treated in prison before. I find that absolutely remarkable, and I think that really does need to be said. Now, in any other country, if this was happening, say in Russia or in China, but you know, especially in Russia, it would be absolute headline news right across the Western media about the brutal way in which the authorities are treating this whistleblower and dissident. Because it is the United States, it is virtually gone unreported. Hardly any big reports are discussing this. And that really makes me feel very unhappy and worried about the future.
It's just selective prosecution, because you know the elements of the deep state are never going to forgive Manning for what happened. Okay, well, Manning paid a very high price. Who of you listening to this podcast would trade so many years of your life for something that you believe in. All right, that's a profile in courage, and I think going after Manning again, this shows the lack of any kind of decorum that is left in the U.S. judicial system.
Yeah.
All right, Alexander, we have some Brexit questions. I'm going to read off 2 Brexit questions for you. They're both related.
Good luck.
From Pax Bella, important question on Brexit. In case of an Article 50 extension, will the UK participate in the upcoming EU election? And how is Farage's upcoming Brexit party coming along? And Alexander, a question from Saz Newlove. May will lose her vote on Tuesday. Go for a 3-month extension, knowing full well the EU dictators don't want to see Farage win more seats in the May elections.
Well, I mean, lots of questions here, all around the same point. But I mean, it is a very, very good point, because do the European Union want Britain participating in the May European elections? If Britain is still a member of the European Union in May, when those elections take place, as a result of an Article 50 extension, then there is no question at all they're entitled to participate in those elections. I think Nigel Farage's party is coming along reasonably well, as I understand it, but he's the kind of person who will pull out the stops to get his candidates around, and I would expect that he will do extremely well in that election, with a probably sweeping the board in Northern English and Midlands English seats. So I don't think the European Union will want to see that happen. I don't think the British government will want to see that happen. I think it may nonetheless happen because, of course, the agenda that some people are trying to follow is to stop any kind of leaving, any kind of Brexit at all. We shall wait and see. All at the moment is in flux. I agree that Theresa May's proposal looks like it is certain to be defeated tomorrow, but the word is going out that she is now once again considering postponing the vote. So we shall see what happens. It's all is in flux, and I think people are entirely right to bring up this question of the May elections. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that yet.
Alexander, but couldn't you just as easily say the opposite? All is going to plan.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because there's been an article recently on Zero Hedge, which is supposed to be based on information that's come out of Germany, which alleges that Theresa May and Angela Merkel got together in summer last year, and Theresa May apparently told Angela Merkel that the entire future of Britain was definitely as a member of the European Union, and that she was going to try and spin this thing out as long as she could in order to allow the anti-EU feeling in Britain to abate. So it's possible that there was such a plan. I still find that difficult to believe, actually.
Okay. But I still think it's a fair question, because
it's an excellent question.
It's just kicking the can down the road. Just keep kicking the can. Keep kicking the can. That's what it is.
I know. I find it difficult to believe that Theresa May herself would put herself through all of this and trash her reputation because she is so fanatical about Britain, keeping Britain in the European Union, that she's prepared to trash her reputation as Prime Minister and destroy her party in order to achieve it. But, you know, people do some very strange things at times. A lot of people think that. And, of course, what Theresa May thinks, she's not the only player in this game. And as I think I said before in other lives that we've done, certainly there are people within the political class, within the cabinet, the Conservative cabinet, and within the civil service who have definitely, I think, been working to keep Britain inside the European Union. And maybe this has been going according to their plan, even if it isn't Theresa May's. But, you know, one doesn't really know, because so much has been kept secret. I don't personally think, if that was the plan, that Theresa May was part of it.
So it's just all chaos theory. Okay.
I tend to think it's more chaos theory, but also it's important to stress a political class that doesn't like Brexit at all and has not really wanted, has never had his heart in it, and with some sections of it that have been out to sabotage it right from the start.
Okay, Peter from Ballroom of Mars. Will the private sector opportunist Eric Prince actually receive federal authorizations to start calling his own shots in the Middle East? There are reports that Eric Prince will take on more of a lead role in Afghanistan. What do you make of that, Peter?
I think it's terrible. If you look at the breadth of history, it was really just before the Napoleonic Wars. You had armies that were basically mercenaries. I mean, Austrians and Germans and Prussian, they would work. They'd work for Napoleon if you paid them. All right. I mean, and then with the end of the Napoleonic Wars, you started having the development of very strong nation states, and then that came to an end where you fought for your own country. I mean, it would be nonsensical to think about it in the 20th century of having different nationalities being paid to fight against their own people. But this is where we're going. We're going back to the age of mercenaries. To what degree Prince would have some operational control, I think it's a bit dodgy, because what is their mission? Is Prince's mission his own mission for profit, or is it representing the United States? I don't think there are many people in the United States would find that to be very, very dangerous, because you'd basically be allowing a civilian unelected to be making foreign policy decisions that would impact the entire nation and the Western world in general. So I think it's a much more nuanced thing here. I could well imagine, we're hearing from a year to 5 years of pulling out of Afghanistan. Would Prince and his operation be able to fill in the gap as that withdrawal was happening? That's a possibility. Maybe that's what he's thinking about there. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the power brokers in Iraq and in Afghanistan do not want any foreign, particularly Western military presence there at all. Okay, so that's the flip side of all of this. But could Prince and his mercenaries be able to cash in on the process of withdrawal? You bet, and I think that's what he's looking at.
All right, guys, hit that like button. Let's get people on this live. Spread the word about the channel. Go to the Duran shop, buy a T-shirt, and you will find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Donate to us; that helps us out a whole bunch. Alexander from Law is Truth. Is it too early to touch on the Spanish and Israeli elections?
No, I don't think it is. I think Spain, let's take Spain first. I mean, it seems to me that Spain is going through the same cycle that we've seen in several other countries, in Germany and in France and in Italy, in which we see the centrist parties, the socialists and the old-style conservatives that have dominated politics in Spain for a very, very long time. Their ascendancy is starting to crumble, and we see new parties on the right and the left, like the Vox party in Spain, are now beginning to emerge. So I think we're going to see a more volatile situation in Spain, and we're going to see a drift in Spain towards a more clearly defined anti-EU right-wing force starting to grow in strength in Spain, as it has already done in local elections in Andalusia. And I think that largely what we're going to see is a weakening of the ability of centrist parties to control the Spanish government. No party in Spain probably winning clear-cut majorities, fragile and unstable governments as Spain moves in, as it finds itself in a transition and moves, as I said, to a new kind of politics a little further down the road. Very similar in some ways to what we saw in Germany. In Israel, I think it's a very different situation. It's a very, very different country. I wouldn't hesitate to count Netanyahu out. I don't yet know how that's going to shape out, but I think that we're also seeing growing instability in Israel too.
All right. Peter, a super chat from Vladimir. Do you think the world monetary system will collapse and we'll go back to the gold standard? I've watched Mike Maloney's series about monetary issues. What do you think, Peter?
I think we're in for some very, very choppy waters, because after all those years of quantitative easing, you've really just re-energized a broken financial system that was evident in 2008. I think that we're in for some very stormy weathers, mostly primarily is because the United States is actually destroying its own currency. It's weaponized the dollar and making the dollar less and less reliable and less attractive. And the U.S. is doing it. It's self-inflicted wound. I mean, it's the crazies like Bolton that they see these short-term goals that they think they can achieve using overwhelming force. And I'm not talking about the military. I'm talking about the Treasury Department here. But the implications of which will affect us for a long time to come. And the countries, I think Russia is basically done with U.S. securities, done. Okay, China is showing a remarkable indifference. They're not attracted to them anymore. The Indians are doing the same thing, and even the Saudis are having to contemplate a non-petrodollar world. I mean, that's how serious this is all getting. And of course, the euro is the most loathsome currency as far as how it's envisioned and how it's supposed to work. When the euro enters into a crisis, there's no tools to fix it. I mean, that's really the scary thing about it. So the world financial system is really, really shaky right now. And primarily it's because the United States is grossly mismanaging it.
Mm.
Alexander?
Yes, I mean, Peter's absolutely right. I mean, there's two sides to this. I mean, the United States is abusing the reserve currency status of the dollar in two ways. Firstly, it is using it as an instrument of economic warfare against countries that it doesn't like Russia, like Venezuela now, like all sorts of other countries, and Iran, of course. And that, of course, undermines trust in the dollar as the world's international reserve currency. And the other way that the United States is abusing the reserve currency status of the dollar is that its economy now is floating on a sea of debt, which it finances by electronically creating dollars in the belief that those dollars will continue to have value, because as the dollar is a reserve currency, people will go on using it. Now, if you like, that's a circular approach to having a reserve currency, and it is an unsustainable one. Sooner or later, all of this is going to catch up with the United States unless it changes its policies radically, puts its own financial house in order, and gives up on using the dollar in the way that we said, and understands that having a reserve currency is a trust which carries obligations. I have to say, I see no sign of any of that. And it is highly likely, it seems to me, that at some point before very long, and of course, we can't say how long, people will start to look for alternatives. And one of those alternatives that people will probably look at is gold. And the fact that central banks around the world, in China, in India, in Turkey, in Russia, are now stockpiling gold, may be a sign of things to come.
And the interesting thing, too, is that with Donald Trump's new budget, which was delayed because of the government shutdown, it's making there's no clear-cut trajectory here. I mean, the GOP had promised trying to balance the federal budget over a 10-year period. Now that has been completely blown out of the water. I think it's in April, May, where they're going to have to reconsider the debt ceiling, and considering how divided Washington is now, that's going to be a very, very difficult fight to how to move that forward. And of course, as the financial world watches the circus go on in Washington, again, it's undermining the currency, because the curators of the currency use it as a domestic political weapon as well. That does not inspire confidence. And we see this year after year. It's getting worse and worse. So cooler, more sober minds are saying, why should we parlay in this? We've got to start looking at alternatives. And people are. again, it's his future historians will look at is, this was one of the cardinal mistakes that empire made. It wasn't responsible. It didn't act responsible when it came to its reserve currency.
No.
Yeah, well said. Let's get to some more super chats. Guys, send us your super chats. We will try to read all the super chats that you send us. Super chat from Pat Hacker. Where is Mark? Mark is in Moscow and all is well, we hope. From Chosi, super chat. Alexander, the Bruges Group released that May and Merkel colluded together to ruin Brexit. This is treason and May should be in big trouble. What do you think?
Yes, this is the a report that I discussed just a moment ago when we discussed Brexit before, which has now also appeared on Zero Hedge, that she supposedly agreed with Angela Merkel that Britain would eventually remain in the European Union, and that it was all this Brexit negotiation that she has been doing is simply smoke and mirrors to enable that to happen. I've said what I think. I don't personally think that is I don't personally think that is true. I think before I believe it, I would need to see an awful lot more evidence of that than this. This report originates from Germany, and I'm skeptical about it because I doubt personally that Theresa May herself would destroy her reputation and jeopardize her party to achieve something like that. Having said that, if it is true, then the anger in Britain with a prime minister who has deceived the country in such a grotesque way is going to be incalculable. I think at that point, we will have a political crisis in Britain, the like of which we have never seen. But as I said, before I come to the point of believing in that, I would like to see some more evidence of it before, as I said, I said, this was true, and before I jump to any conclusions about it.
But it seems to me in the mind, the little mind of Theresa May, she does have a very small head.
Mm-hmm.
I think she would see it by staying in the customs union, that Britain would, in a sense, still be part of the European Union.
Yeah.
I think that's how she sees it. Because with her plan, I mean, and I think the plan was still fresh off the press, and we had one of our podcasts here, and you and I were just flabbergasted that you would even propose such a thing.
Well, absolutely.
And I think I think that's what she's thinking, is that, okay, they can call it Brexit, they can call it landing on Mars, or jumping up and down on Jupiter. They can call it anything they want, but we'll still be in the European Union.
I think this is possibly right. I mean, it may very well be that when people talk about Theresa May saying that Britain would remain a member of the European Union, what she actually meant was that it would remain a member of the customs union. Now, a lot of people in Britain are saying that is Brexit in name alone. And the kind of deal that Theresa May has negotiated, where Britain cannot leave the customs union without the agreement of the European Union, that really is Brexit in name alone. But whether that was a product of a plot, of a conspiracy, or rather of incompetent negotiation, I don't know. And as I said, until I know a little bit more about this story, I'm not going to jump to opinions about it. If it is true, it is appalling, and many people in Britain are going to say so, and the political consequences from it would be enormous.
Okay, super chat Peter from Megawatt. 1 year after the Skripal affair, what do you think about the way Russia handled it? To me, it looked like they were genuinely stunned by the enormity of the lies and accusations coming from Britain.
Yeah, they were stunned. Absolutely. I mean, the number of occasions I've lost count during the course of this, what I think was a charade. Russia asked for more information to be able to confirm or not confirm, or try to understand a timeline, a fact line. because they were bewildered by the whole thing and very, very frustrated by it, because the inconsistencies were glaring. I mean, really glaring. I think, and it's one of the reasons the story just disappeared, because they got whoever engineered this whole thing got tired of trying to figure out how to cover their tracks, because there's so many inconsistencies. And where are the Skripals? Okay. I mean, when they were apparently, the Skripals were under medical attention, Russian consular officials were not allowed contact them with their own nationals. And with the daughter coming out with that statement that was very wooden and it seemed to be rehearsed without emotion, we don't know what her wishes are. We don't know where she is either. And we've had the family members here in Russia completely bewildered by what's going on here. So, yeah, I mean, I think the Russian government did the best it could under the circumstances. I don't know what else it could have possibly done. I mean, because it's such an outrageous story. It's just impossible to believe as the authorities present it.
Yeah. Can I just say something about this, which is a fundamental principle of justice, is that if you're going to make an accusation against somebody, you provide that person with the evidence against them so that they can respond to it. The British have consistently refused to do that, in this case, with the Russians. So the Russians are left guessing. They see all these stories that appear in the British media, many of them inconsistent with each other, so that we now hear, for example, that the roof of the Skripal house has been demolished, where we were previously told that the substance was put on the doorknob. So why, take down the roof? I mean, it doesn't really make a great deal of sense. And it's very difficult when the Russians are not provided with the case against them for them to respond to it in any coherent way. And I think very properly, actually, the Russians finally said some time ago that they're just not going to even try anymore, because they can't keep up with all these leaks that come out, because they've no way of knowing what leak is true and what is not. And I have to say, in their position, I would do the same.
I mean, also maybe from a detective point of view or prosecutorial, from a prosecutor's point of view, what was the intent if this was actually played out by the Russian security forces? What was their intentionality? What was their goal? That itself is very, very odd. There's no clear understanding of a spy that was traded, that had been briefed and debriefed and debriefed and debriefed, and then he was debriefed again by the British. I mean, if they wanted to have cause harm to Skripal, they could have easily done it, and they wouldn't have traded him. So, I mean, what was the goal? What was the intention outside of creating a horrific, mind-blowing scandal? And I think it's the latter.
Indeed.
All right. Super chat from Pat Hacker and Rosebud. Guys, thank you for these super chats that you're sending. But let's not comment on this anymore. Let's stay on point, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about in the news. So let's keep it to talking about the subjects in the news, guys. But we really do appreciate your super chat, and thank you, Wildcat, for your super chat as well. Alexander, do you want to comment a little on the unrest in Algeria?
Well, Algeria is one. There's actually been a very interesting article about this, about also how this might affect the situation
in the American Conservative.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting article, which has, I think, been widely circulated. Now, I think the thing to say about Algeria is that it's a country that has fought a civil war in the past. None of us really knows very much about the political situation and the extent of political stability there, because the government, the present government that exists in Algeria, is a product of a very brutal and very violent civil war. So the fact that there is unrest in Algeria now points to a situation which has never politically fully stabilized, and where there has never really been political stabilization. Now, if I can say I'm not going to make any predictions about what's going to happen in Algeria. I don't know enough about the country to be able to say that. I don't know how strong the institutions in Algeria are, and I hope very much that whatever happens in Algeria, the situation somehow holds together and we do not have a repetition of what happened previously in the 1990s with another descent into violence and potentially civil war, because that would be a disaster in the Maghreb at a time when, as I said, the whole situation in the Middle East is still so unstable.
And the political settlement of the 1990s after the Civil War, it doesn't hold a whole lot of legitimacy for people of Algeria, okay? It was definitely a stopgap attempt to stop the violence here. The interesting thing is, the sad thing and the dangerous thing is here, is that because there is indecision and instability in Algeria, it can easily spread to France, okay?
Absolutely.
Very easily. And they can fight their pitched battles inside of France. The article in the American Conservative is Algeria, the iceberg that could sink Emmanuel Macron. I'm thinking of other icebergs, but this was another one, I suppose, here. And the author is Scott McConnell, and it was published on March 8th. It's a very good article.
And indeed, and just to add one very last thing, which is, of course, what is adding to the sense of instability, is that the President Bouteflika, who is perhaps the one sort of stable point in this very unstable and not very legitimate political situation, is apparently seriously ill. He's had a succession of strokes. He's now, I believe, 82, and he's been in hospital in Switzerland. So there must be also great uncertainty about what comes after him, with no very obvious sign of a successor. So it's a very unstable situation, as Peter correctly said, not a legitimate situation. Let us hope that somehow the institutions hold and adrift into outright collapse, and civil war doesn't happen in this very sensitive part of the world.
And this is a textbook case where you sweep under the rug very serious institutional rot and hope on the mortality of one individual. And now we're seeing it. Algeria is coming face to face with that lack of institutional legitimacy and stability. And Macron is got to be sweating on this one too, among other issues.
Yeah.
All right, from Kronos, Peter. Politically correct and transgender grooming of youth. Is this an attack on Christian values? I don't know about the grooming of youth part, but can you comment on the politically correct stuff and the, I don't know if you want to call it the transgender agenda, but I think what's happening with identity politics and intersectionality in the U.S.
Well, personally, as a conservative, I think that, adults should teach their children values. I think the state has no business in doing that, particularly with children. Now, once you get to of age, and young adults can make these decisions what path they want to take or explore, I don't have a problem with that. But when it comes to children, I do have a problem with that, because their psychological development is, well, obviously of a child, and children are very impressionable. And I think that particularly in the school system, I think they should be able to read, think, mathematics, a little bit of science, just a little bit of all what I just mentioned, because in America, they're producing functional illiterates after university and college because they've been programming them for their entire life. This is a big story in Britain. I think I was reading it this morning. Is that it's Alexander Mercouris, you're going to correct me here. I mean, it's something like a 90% Muslim community, in the UK, and they just of that 90%, something like 80% just took their kids out of school and said, "What are you teaching them? What are you talking about transgender people and homosexual relation? Why are you talking to our children about that?" We have moral values, and we will teach our children what those values are. What business does the state? And something that has no science behind it at all, okay, none. This is just virtue signaling. This is propagandizing. This is indoctrination. There's no science behind it. And you want to experiment on children. That's called child abuse.
Mm.
Alexander, do you have any comments
Well,
on that?
the point about Muslims taking their children out of school is absolutely true. And what we're now seeing in Britain increasingly, and I'm not happy about it, I should add, is we're seeing a parallel Muslim education system starting.
Exactly. Yep.
I
There
mean,
you go. There you go.
I mean, very, very close to where I live, there is an entire Muslim educational institutions and Muslim schools where people are taught subjects, and Muslim children are educated, and of course they get segregated from each other, and they're taught the proper the proper syllabus, but they're also taught Muslim education, and some of it, frankly, I'm not entirely happy with, because it seems to me that is dividing British society in all kinds of ways. So, but I can understand why a lot of religious people are finding it very difficult to adapt to or to accept a lot of these changes. And of course, in the United States, this is something which I think Peter perhaps knows more about than I do, but there's a growing discussion amongst some Christians about something called the Benedict option, which is basically to sort of withdraw from, as I understand it, active involvement in what is becoming an increasingly anti-Christian environment, and basically to continue to practice one's Christianity outside it and in sort of parallel to it. I may not be explaining this correctly, because I'm not sure I understand it fully.
You're doing it very, but I would just add an important caveat for the Benedict option. You don't have to be Christian. Okay, you don't have to wrap it up in one religious faith here. What it is it's about respecting a certain basic values, and it's more about the content of your character. I mean, in a way, Martin Luther King is the origins of all of this, because we were taught, and I think he was a great man, that we should be first and foremost concerned with the content of each individual character. And what his teachings have been thrown out by the left, and now they want to impose an indoctrination on people. And the result is that people will opt out, but they will opt out in a way that will divide society even more. Now, in the United States, it has a very long Judeo-Christian tradition. And it doesn't have a huge influx of Muslims, but in the countries of Europe, where this influx has been rather intense over a short amount of time, and if they choose their Benedict option, it's going to only divide societies more. So I think the state should be very, very careful. The state should confine itself to teaching young people skills to live in the modern world. Let the synagogues, let the churches, let the temples, let them and their families talk about these attitudes about faith and how to live in society. The state has nothing to do with it. They have no right to indoctrinate young people. They should teach them basic things to survive. Okay, full stop.
Yes.
Okay, we're approaching an hour. Guys, hit that like button, spread the word about the Duran to the channel, share it with everybody you know, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and click on the notifications bell. Guys, we want to let you know that we have another channel called the Duran Clips, where we take the live show and we try to get the best 20 Q&As out of it and post them up. So I put a link for that channel in the description box. Subscribe to it. It's the Duran Clips. And at the end of this live show, we're going to take a couple of days, get a good 20 to 25 video shorts out of it and put them on there. So subscribe to that channel and you get the best of the live show there. Peter, do you have any music to introduce this next question?
I was looking for it. Go to a different question. Let me find it, okay? People will like this, okay? People will go to a different question.
All right, let's go to another super chat from Josie. Alexander, how successful was the Yellow Vests' decisive weekend, and how will their sit-ins work?
Well, it seems to me that the great achievement of the Yellow Vests is not achieving any breakthrough on a particular day, but in keeping their protests alive and rumbling on and they seem to have managed to do that for, I think it's the 17th week. Now, I think that is quite an achievement. And the fact that it is quite an achievement is proved by the increasing response that you're seeing from the French government and from Emmanuel Macron, which is taking an increasingly authoritarian turn. And
yeah. Alexander.
Oh God.
I think your phone is ringing.
I think Alexander's phone is ringing. All right, we lost Alexander.
All right. Yes. All right.
All right, Peter, are you ready for the Trudeau question?
Yeah, hang on here. Let me go here.
Yeah, Alexander's trying to come back. We lost him.
Trudeau!
All right, Peter, here's the question. Do you think Trudeau, from Goberwala, do you think Trudeau is out of lifelines?
You know, we have, as gleeful as I am about the trials and tribulations of the Canadian Prime Minister, he may have a short lifeline politically, but his party doesn't. Okay, so and that's the difference between the American system and the Canadian system here. I don't think he's handling this scandal very well. He's acting like he's Mr. Teflon. I thought he was supposed to be Mr. Transparency. He's saying, well, as Prime Minister and Justin Trudeau, this is not a scandal, this is not a problem, therefore it isn't a problem and it isn't a scandal. That doesn't really cut it with me, and it doesn't cut it with a lot of people in Canada here. The thing is that with this scandal that he's facing, it is the difference between his words and his actions, okay? I mean, if this had been Mayor Daley of Chicago, and he said, there's no corruption in Chicago, then well, people would say, well, that's just, you know, that's how Mayor Daley sees his world, okay, because it's completely corrupt. But Trudeau has a very different problem. He has an image problem because his words are not matching his actions. And plus, he ran on a campaign plank of being a feminist. He called himself a feminist and promoting the interests of Indigenous people, whereas Attorney General is an Indigenous woman that he fired or forced out of power, out of her position as AG, gave her the token position of Veteran Affairs, and then she was forced to leave, felt she was forced to leave as well. So, I mean, his words and his actions don't match, and he looks like a schmuck, okay? How this is going to affect his election fortunes, it's still unclear, but this story isn't going away. It just simply isn't going to go away for him.
Okay, Peter, we have a super chat from Jess.
Can I talk a little bit about the yellow vest real quick here?
Yeah, you want to comment on the yellow vest question? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Alexander Mercouris is absolutely right. They haven't achieved a breakthrough, but they're still there, okay? And the French government is looking for more and more ways to obstruct freedom of expression. They're looking very, very bad. Macron and his government repeatedly make the same mistake. They think they can punish people, intimidate people from not going out on the street. They're dead wrong. Okay, they're making the problem worse because they're not addressing the core issues of the people that are protesting. And it is, how do I live to the end of the month? It's not I'm arguing about a poetry, a plaque on a statue. We're not talking about what kind of movie should be in French theaters. Okay, we're not talking about the color, the inside of painting of Parliament. No, we're talking about real problems that affect lives. Millions and millions of people that have been left behind in France by this ideology that wants to destroy your sense of identity. People have had enough. The yellow vests are not going to go away, and it will continue. And this is in the great spirit of French culture. They taught the world, so much of the world, about what it means to stand up for your rights. And I appreciate the French people for what they're doing, and we're certainly not going to forget them here.
All right, Alexander is back. Alexander, you hear us?
Absolutely. I'm sorry about that, guys.
It's okay. When Putin calls me, the same thing happens. So don't worry about it. Okay.
It's for having to use the phone, I'm afraid.
All right, Peter, this is a good super chat from Jess. Will there be an internet bill of rights to stop tech giants shutting down conservative voices before Trump's 2020 re-election bid, or is it too late? I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, Peter.
It's too late. It's too late. It's really going to take a very solid bipartisan, at least in the United States, in dealing with Silicon Valley. It's going to take a bipartisan effort, and bipartisanship is the last thing we can even conceive now in Washington. On top of it, Facebook and Google have stuffed money in just about everybody's pockets. Okay, they have their own institutes and their own think tanks, and the same old nonsense. Okay, manufacturing consent with a big thick envelope. All right, they're really well protected here, but it is destroying the body politic. I mean, just this morning, I tried to share an article written by Glenn Greenwald. Glenn, I mean, if you agree or disagree with him, he's a man of standing, a great journalist, and he's a lefty. I'm not, okay, but he's a great journalist. And I tried to share it on Facebook, and Facebook refused it. It violates their community standards. Okay, so that's a real chilling effect, isn't it? Okay, Facebook, I guess, with the kind services that are well paid, paying the Atlantic Council was deemed Zero Hedge a threat to the universe. Okay, and I'm a threat for trying to share it. Zero Hedge is a aggregator, primarily an aggregator, and they post pretty good stuff. Sometimes I think, oh, no way, that's not for me. But that's what aggregation is all about. And let the consumer be aware. Okay, I certainly am. I don't share things that I think are dubious, that I think are not well sourced, and sometimes they pop up there. Okay. But a lot of it is extremely good, and it's written by real professionals that are not associated with the mainstream. That is hence the huge popularity of Zero Hedge. So again, the chilling effect is there, and you have both political parties with their head in the sand, terrified because the thing is that the Democrats and the liberals and the progressives, they still haven't given up on taking over these platforms. Okay, they want to capture them for their purposes to go after people like us. Okay, but at the end of the day, these people in Silicon Valley are going to make their own choices based on their own values. They could give a rat's ass what a Democrat thinks about anything. As long as they're not regulating us, who cares?
And guys, you can find us on Gab and Minds. I don't know how many people out there in the chat are using Gab or Minds, but we have a page there, and we actually update it pretty much every day. So you can find us on those platforms as well. And I actually like Minds, and I also like Gab. Pretty much has everything that Facebook and Twitter has. You're not missing anything. Plus, you have the free speech. Alexander, 2 questions from William on the same subject. Do you think Netanyahu will lash out more militarily against Syria over the Golan Heights? And I heard the Kushner peace plan for Palestinians and Israelis has something to do with Israel taking down the 400 plus miles of the wall. How likely is that?
Well, first of all, I think it is highly likely that Netanyahu is going to intensify pressure on Syria. The Syrians have already signaled very clearly that they will take a very strong line on the Golan Heights. I think that we have to watch the situation in the Middle East with great care because, frankly, it looks to me like it's deteriorating fast. As to what Kushner is proposing, it will not be. Kushner can propose whatever he likes about the wall. I don't think that the Israelis are going to shift on this 1 millimeter. The wall has served their interests very well. I deplore it. I think it's wrong, but I can understand why they built it, and it's worked for them. And I don't see them changing it just because Jared Kushner wants them to.
No, they're just gonna, I can just see it right now. They'll roll it out. Netanyahu will pat Jared on the back. Wonderful job, great working with you, great collaborating, and we'll do our best to implement it. And then as soon as he walks off the podium and says that wall ain't coming down, okay. So exactly. I don't know much about Jared Kushner, okay, but I'm sorry, he doesn't strike me as the right guy to be doing this, but other administration officials from other administrations have done no better because there's no real political will to see an even-handed negotiation and settlement there. It has never been that, well, ever since Oslo, at least, it's always been how you can relegate and essentially disappear the Palestinian. Okay, that's what they want to do. I mean, I understand. I haven't read all the details, but they just basically want to say, well, there are no Palestinian refugees. That category doesn't exist, and because the category doesn't exist, those people don't exist. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not living in the real world. All right, not at all. And plus, what it'll be, the State Department will come out. You know, Israel's going to have to take it. They're going to have to suck it in. You know, because Trump wants to show that he can call the shots. But it's actually the other way around. It'll be smoke and mirrors. You know, the Israelis will pay some kind of lip service to it, and then they'll just keep doing what they're doing.
Exactly. Peter's got it exactly right. What the Israelis invariably do in this situation is that they appear to agree to whatever is proposed, and then they set a condition for carrying out that which they have pretended to agree to. And as night follows day, the United States and the Western powers then agree to that condition, which then becomes impossible for the Palestinians to agree to. And the whole thing fails. And that has been the recurring pattern in all the negotiations that have happened to settle this issue for as long as I can remember.
And what they've done is they've created the one-state solution, and that's what they're going to have to deal with now. That's their greatest nightmare, and they created it by their own intransience, okay? Israel created its own worst nightmare, the one-state solution.
Exactly.
Okay, Jan Schoenfield, thank you for your super chat. We appreciate it. S. Bennett, thank you for your super chat as well. And another super chat, Alexander from Jazz. Theresa May is clearly trying to duplicitously derail Brexit, but can she actually stop Article 50 because of the legislative hurdles to do this?
Well, I don't think she's going to stop Article 50, at least not before the 29th of March. I take it by that you mean revoke Article 50. You're absolutely right. That would require legislation. And I'm not sure that that majority to carry out that legislation exists in the House of Commons. But I think what she's going to try and do, in fact, what I'm sure is going to happen if her deal is voted on and fails tomorrow, as I expect, is postpone the implementation of Article 50 by 3 months. And then when those 3 months are up, if there's still no agreement, there will be another extension and then another extension. And we could be looking at a year or 2 years or 5 or never. And I think that's probably more likely the way that Brexit is going to be stopped, if it is in the end stopped. I'm not convinced it will be stopped, because so many people in Britain have voted for it and will become increasingly angry if it doesn't happen.
So, you know, the next time a British government speaks about the need to strengthen and return democracy to a country like Venezuela, well, what right does any British government now have to talk about democracy in any sense of the word? Okay, well, and I've been saying this for years now. The way these elites are operating, they're destroying the institutions they claim to uphold. They're the biggest violators of it all. And what it does is to create chaos. Look, what 3 months, another 3 months, another 3 months. What are people and businesses supposed to do?
Well, indeed,
it's going to happen or not happen. You know, I'm coming, I'm going. I mean, this is insanity. This is irresponsible governance. And so what right do they have to tell anyone else how to run their lives in the world? It's rubbish.
Peter, on Venezuela, the New York Times and even CNN are now admitting that the humanitarian aid trucks were one big false flag. It was a lie, and it wasn't bombed by Maduro's National Guards. What do you make of that story? Now the mainstream media is starting to walk it back.
Well, why are they saying that? Is it because of the virtue and hard work of New York Times journalists? No. It's that, you know, Max Blumenthal at Gray Zone and RT, the ones that foiled this propaganda story, would say, but look at the video. I mean, don't believe me. Look at the video. And that's why they had to walk it back. It's not because of their integrity. Okay, they got caught with their pants down and their faces are red. They have no choice but to walk it back. But it's still Maduro's fault. Okay, that's what they keep saying. You know, oh my God, it's like dealing with juvenile delinquents. You know, CNN and New York Times. It's written by 12-year-olds for 6-year-olds to read. Okay, and watch. Okay, I think it's a sterling example of the state of mainstream media right now in the West.
I think I am very, very cynical about this retraction. Obviously, the New York Times has written a small retraction, but compare that with the huge amount of publicity, the story about Maduro's troops setting fire to those humanitarian trucks got. I mean, most people are not going to be aware of the New York Times retraction. Even a lot of people who were probably skeptical about the story. Far, far more people will have heard the original claims. And I don't see people like Marco Rubio or John Bolton or Mike Pompeo or all of those people coming round now and saying that they were wrong. So it seems to me that this admission by the New York Times was done first and foremost to give cover to a media campaign by saying, yes, we got it wrong on this one. And here's the proof. We had one little article in the New York Times, but ultimately the disinformation campaign we're seeing around Venezuela is going to go on and it's going to intensify.
Absolutely correct. Yes.
Alexander from AP, Erdogan said they are getting S-400s and may jointly produce S-500. What does this switch from Western to Russian allied war industry mean for Turkey? Can Russia match US war industry?
Yes, I think in some fields they're ahead. I mean, in surface-to-air missile technology, they're definitely ahead. And I think that's widely accepted. What will happen, whether the Russians will be prepared to trust the Turks with all this very advanced technology they have, whilst Turkey remains a member of NATO, allied to the United States, that remains to be seen. But I'm going to say something. I was very dubious about this S-400 sale when I first heard about it. I said to me, what are the Russians thinking about? Are they really going to sell these missiles to Turkey, this country that is an ally of the United States? Are they going to trust Erdogan with it? And I never imagined that it would that the Russians would reap so many political benefits from this affair. And the reason they've done so is because of the extraordinary way that the United States has mishandled this issue. As I said, it should have said to Turkey, you want to buy your S-400s? Buy your S-400s. We will give you your F-35s. We will give you whatever else you want. But let some of our people come along and have a look at those S-400s so that we understand them a little better. And that could have been done in a secret and private way. And I wouldn't be surprised if Erdogan and his people in time would have agreed to it.
I still think, this is not the end of any story. When it comes to Erdogan, you're always in the middle, okay? The fat lady has not sung. Can you say that these days? But, I said it. This is all in flux. This is pure vintage Erdogan. It's his little shell game. He's doing it really fast right now. Anyway, he's a fascinating character to watch.
Absolutely.
Peter, a super chat from Jas. Is William Barr actually going to take action against the career criminals at the DOJ and the FBI, as well as indict Brennan and Clapper for lying to Congress? Great question. Okay. I'm sure both of you guys have a lot to say about this.
I've never done this on camera, but I'm going to do it now. What do I hope that William Barr will do that? Okay, I just crossed myself. Yeah, I hope he does. I think what first and foremost, what he has to do is that the plethora of leaks that came out of the waning days of the Obama administration, they have to be addressed. Those are serious felonies. Okay, and we have to remember that Barack Obama signed a directive allowing so many more people to have access to sensitive material to obviously leak it to hurt the prospects of Donald Trump and his presidency. He is a good litigator. He's a very good has a very good legal mind, and if he's going to be going in that direction, of course, he has to review all of the testimonies of all of the what is it, rogue gallery that we have of Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, which seems, Bruce Orr and Rod Rosenstein don't seem to see eye to eye during their interviews with Congress and with the DOJ officials. So somebody's lying. They're probably both lying. Barr has to get down to business and figure out what that is. He's see, the Democrats, they have 2 years to call 81 people and probably have 20 or 30 committees investigating. But William Barr has at least 2 years to unearth and to connect all of the dots of the illegality and malfeasance of these old Obama figures. And I hope he gets them, and I hope they go to face a grand jury. He's got 2 years. I think he can do it.
Alexander, do you have any comments on this?
I like Peter, I wish. My wish is my hope, but it is not my expectation. I have to be frank about this.
Fair.
Something may happen if special counsel is appointed to investigate this thing, and it cries out for that kind of investigation. But so many people are involved. So many institutions are involved. So much of the US government is involved. So many powerful political players outside the US government, the Democratic Party, the media, all those people are involved, that for William Barr and whatever special counsel he appoints to take all these people on, I think that is a Herculean task, especially in a country like the United States, with all the lawyers they'll be able to throw at him, all the arguments and obfuscations that they will play, all the difficulties they will have in getting judges in various jurisdictions to support them, because one thing has become very obvious to me, and that is the gross partiality of some judges in the United States and their support for what is clearly an anti-Trump political agenda. When I look at all of these things together, I say to myself, is it going to happen? And I have doubts, but I hope it does. I hope William Barr finds the courage. I hope that in the end, we will see that sort of investigation. Because let's be frank, if the United States is going to remain a country where the United States Constitution continues to have force, that kind of investigation is it is desperately needed.
The only the good thing on the positive side of the ledger, Alexander, is that there's already been a lot of discovery process that we already have. Okay, absolutely. And that gives me hope, because we know what questions to ask now. We're not fumbling around in the dark. We have a plethora of information, and even I'm not a legal person, obviously. I'm trained as a historian, but I can connect a lot of dots here, and I can very specifically, I know who I would like to prosecute. I tend to think that if you go after a certain number of people, then you shake the tree, then it all kind of comes out. But of course, I'm very grossly optimistic, okay, because I want to have hope that there will be some kind of equitable outcome of all this, because for a lot of us watching this has been so grossly unfair and selective justice applied.
Yes, Peter, what you say is absolutely right, and I think the American people, irrespective of what happens, owe a great debt to people like Delvin Nunes, Trey Gowdy, Grassley in the Senate, those sort of people, Lindsey Graham.
And also think about Sarah Carter and John Solomon.
Solomon on the Hill. I mean, all sorts of people who have been beavering away at this and who've been able, as Peter correctly says, we got all the pieces. I reckon around 70% of the pieces in the puzzle. There's still quite a few pieces still out there, but we have enough of the puzzle to be able to guess,
to see the picture. Yeah,
to see the picture, to get a good sense of the entire picture.
Who's Alexander Christopher? Who's my favorite at the Wall Street Journal? Strussel. What's her first?
Strussel. Kimberly Strussel.
Kimberly, she's awesome.
Yes,
awesome.
But as I say, no one should be under any illusions of the enormous challenge that a proper investigation would face. And of course, the media would be unanimously hostile to it, monolithically so.
Except for Sean Hannity.
Except for Sean Hannity and Tucker. And Tucker.
And Laura Ingraham.
And Laura.
the whole prime time lineup.
The prime time lineup.
Yeah. Alexander from Reckless Abandon. Is Viktor Orban in any trouble from the globalists? There's a lot of people talking about Orban in the chat. Viktor Orban has probably helped to save Europe from utter chaos. And as Bennett says, yes, Orban listens to his people, unlike British politicians. Orban has said that he will not allow mass migration into Hungary. I think he said it, I believe, yesterday, actually. What do you think?
He's got that tattooed on his forehead.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely.
Right. Viktor Orban is been under trouble from the globalists for years. They have been pursuing a concerted attack against him. We've seen recently protests in Hungary, which we've discussed on previous programs, and how those protests have been amplified and exaggerated, and no doubt to a certain extent orchestrated. We've seen attempts to have his party expelled from the European People's Party, and apparently he's taken a decision to withdraw his party from the European People's Party in the European Parliament. But the point about Orban is he's still standing, and he's still standing because most Hungarians support him, and because however one looks at this, he took over a Hungary which is an economic mess, and he's turned it round. And that's been a remarkable achievement, and a lot of Hungarians give him credit for it. And we've also seen what we might call anti-globalist forces starting to emerge in places like Italy and in places like Germany, and remarkably also in places like France. And there was an extraordinary article that I was reading recently by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is a leader of the radical left in France, who was talking about supporting the opponents of the EU in Hungary and Poland, which presumably refers to Kaczynski and Orban. So even a French leftist now is coming out and supporting Orban. So he's not alone in this battle, and we shouldn't think that he is. And he's shown extraordinary tenacity and resilience in standing up to the pressures that have been thrown at him.
This is this paradigm shift that I keep talking about. I mean, Alexander Mercouris brought up a perfect point. Here we have someone from the far traditional left now being able to see across these ideological lines, like taking off their ideological blinkers that the neoliberals and globalists have. Okay. And now they're reaching out. And this is a very positive sign here, because no political order is stagnant. Okay. There's always certain movements forward. You broaden out a debate, you deepen it here, and you start changing it. And this is the kind of conversation that I very, very much encourage. Don't let these people in charge put you into ideological boxes. You are free to start commingling ideas, exploring new ideas, reassessing old ideas, okay? This is what's going on in Europe, because the status quo just isn't working.
Peter, a super chat from Michael. Can you guys please do more China, South China Sea, the trade war, Sino-Russian relationships, and its growing importance in balancing the U.S.?
Noted.
What do you think about that, Peter?
Definitely, that's obviously a direction, and I'm delving into it more and more. And actually, this is a kind of surprise to a lot of people. The national interest online, it's a really quirky outfit, I think, because sometimes they have some really fascinating articles, and sometimes it's just kind of fluff. But they're looking very closely at that, and of course, Zero Hedge that I read a couple times a day. They're keeping focus on it, so I'm boning up on that because I think it's really fascinating, and actually it's going to be one of the fulcrums that decide the trajectory of the 21st century.
Absolutely. In fact, in some ways, the most important one, because I mean, the real clash now increasingly is between the United States and China. And if we go back to this question of the relationship between China and Russia, I'm going to say that we were well ahead of the curve on this one. If you look to articles which we were writing in the Duran back in 2016, well before anyone else, we were already talking then about a de facto relationship, a strategic partnership between those two countries at a time when scarcely anybody else was talking about it. We've now seen that strategic partnership evolve and harden. People are already referring to it, or increasingly referring to it, as an alliance, which is perhaps going a little bit far, but we will certainly be covering this increasingly. And of course, with the pipelines, the big pipelines that the Russians have built to China, now almost complete, and with Chinese-Russian trade now hitting $100 billion and growing fast, that relationship is only going to grow and get stronger.
Okay, Peter, this is an interesting one. This is actually for both of you guys from Reckless Abandon. And I kind of agree with this comment. And we've talked about it at length, actually, between the three of us. Carter, Solomon, Lee Smith, Bongino are all protecting Browder by falsely accusing Veselnitskaya of setting up the Trump Tower meeting. I want to broaden this out a little, Peter, by saying they do excellent reports when it comes to the fact that the deep state was after Trump. But when it comes to Russia, for example, Manafort worked with the Russians, Carter, Solomon, Bongino, and many more journalists that are, you would say, on the side of Trump always get this one wrong as well. Even Tucker Carlson and Hannity as well.
Yeah, because it's the third rail that everyone's afraid of. Okay, as long as all the people that you just mentioned, as long as they stay defending Trump, they feel they're in a safe zone because they have a platform, and it's called Fox, okay, or The Hill. But they don't really want to venture beyond that, okay, because they don't want to be excommunicated, okay. And I think that's one of the reasons why they do it. Yeah, I see it all the time, and I'm always really disappointed by it. Well, everyone knows, it's a known fact, it's common knowledge that, but it's not, okay. Well, the Russians gave WikiLeaks Hillary's and Podesta's emails. I mean, we have no evidence of it. I suppose it's possible, but no one's given me any evidence of it. It's never been presented. But the person that asked the question is right, and I notice it all the time. Alexander, Christoforou, and I, because we're in the same time zone, we'll watch Tucker or Hannity and Laura, and sometimes I do it in succession. And we point to that. We're on What's Up later and said, "Yeah, too bad that they can't walk over that line. They're too afraid of it." Okay, yes. And it's at no cost to them the way they see it. Okay, so because Russia is a very convenient boogeyman for people, and even the people that we've talked about here, they don't really want it to go over the line because it doesn't get them anywhere. All right, and they don't want someone at Fox or at the Hill to say, well, you're a lunatic. What do you remember? You're a member of Veeps now with Ray McGovern and all those lunatics, which are some of the smartest people out there right now talking about these things. But it's a very interesting phenomenon. I would actually just like to throw in too, is that this absolute and complete allegiance to Israel all the time. You notice that as well, okay? That's also to stay within the lines, okay? Because there's no downside by praising Israel in their minds. I mean, Dan Bongino does that a lot. It's really irritating.
Yeah, and Joanne says that Bongino has never linked Manafort to Russia. The links are with the links are with Ukraine. Joanna, we know that. And, maybe Bongino hasn't linked Manafort, but I think, and I love Sarah Carter's writing, but I think she's added that line. It's a fact that Russia meddled in the election.
No, but it's a cut and paste thing. That's what it is. Okay, it's always put in there just to be on the safe side. Okay, and as much as I admire her on looking at what the DOJ and the FBI were doing, because I think it's excellent reporting, and I think she's proven over and over again that she has really good sources, but she's never delved into, well, let's take a look at this. This intelligence report that came out in January 2016. Well, she doesn't look at that. She looks at the Christopher Steele dossier and loves to pick at it, but she doesn't really want to challenge the collective wisdom, which it wasn't. It was cherry picked, and very little time was put into it, and specific people were put in place to write the report that they wanted to hear. They don't go there. They don't touch that. It's almost as if it doesn't even exist in their world.
Yeah. Can I add to the list of the people you mentioned, Andrew McCarthy, who is one of the most insightful legal analysts on the whole Russiagate thing. But of course, he also takes a very sort of anti-Russian line on this whole affair. I think the other thing to bear in mind about this is that a lot of these people probably don't like Russia anyway. So they probably, to some extent, are prepared to believe some of these stories without looking at the evidence about it too closely, because they're predisposed to believe it, and as so many other people are. It really requires you to go well outside the box to actually look at this evidence and to say to yourself, well, just a moment. What is the evidence, actually, that the Russians did interfere in the election in any way? And that, I think, is a step which a lot of these people find very difficult to take.
But one thing that I don't understand why people can't say the following, and this is my position here. Did the Russian foreign intelligence agencies, did they get into Hillary's emails? Yeah, probably. A lot of people did. Maybe some Macedonian kids did too. Okay, I don't refute that. Okay, I believe if you make that claim, it probably makes sense because that's what their job is. That's exactly what they're supposed to do. But see, the narrative that we're talking about here is that it assumes that Russia did some kind of meddling, whatever the term meddling. Meddling didn't mean anything 2 years ago. It means whatever you want it to be now. Okay, but what the people that we're talking about, they're just there to circle the wagons around Trump, and they don't care about these other things. It doesn't mean anything to them. All right, and that's why they don't go down that path, because it doesn't pay them any dividends, because it doesn't help protect Donald Trump.
All right, we're following out around this with the answers the door. Oh boy! All right, Peter. Let's take a super chat from Jess. In light of the Democrats' crazy new Green Deal, anti-Semitism, free stuff, and open support of Marxist policies, will Trump wipe the floor with them? And to follow on to that, Peter, from Frederick, is the right has typically been the home of anti-Semitism, yet now we see this label increasingly used against the left. Plus, AIPAC have said they're concerned about this support from the left. So we did a crosstalk on this, and this ties into the Omar situation and all that.
I guess I'm going to disappoint whoever asked the question. I don't think there's that much anti-Semitism out there, okay, at all. I think it just claims. What it is it's a club that you go after your opponents. You're an anti-Semite. You're a racist. Okay, I think it's a cudgel. I don't see it really there. I looked at Omar's statements at that book signing or whatever place that she was at. I don't see the inflammatory language. I'm sorry. I don't see any anti-Semitism at all. I don't see it being an attack on anyone specifically for views that they hold. I mean, just saying that there's a lobby in Washington, D.C. that has a lot of money and has a lot of sway. I mean, I'm sorry if you think that's anti-Semitism. I'm just giving you the facts. It's a very effective lobby. Okay, is it in the best interest of the United States? Now, I can understand why Trump said, you know, the Democratic Party has become anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. Well, that's a bumper sticker, okay? And I'm not surprised he uses it. He's in a re-election for his job. But it seems to me that this is something that is basically a figment of everyone's imagination, and you just want to stick it on your opponent when it, in fact, doesn't actually really exist. And anyone that wants to tie anti-Semitism to animosity towards Israel, they're not connected remotely, okay? And I remember this in the 1980s. The United Nations was voting Zionism is a form of racism, and most of the world believes that, okay? The vast majority of the world believes that. But saying, you know, that you're anti-Semitic for being critical of Israel, well, that's just illogical, and it's just being politically dumb, and people use it all of the time. I'm really ashamed to watch the political elite in the U.S. and in the U.K. bandy about that term, because all it is just to label you and it's a personal destruction and has no basis in reality. So, I mean, the Democratic Party, that's the home of racists. Remember, the Ku Klux Klan was what we would call now their terrorist operation, okay? The Democrats invented it. They invented racism. They invented Jim Crow. All right, so let's have a little historical perspective here. But I think this is there's a lot of smoke, but there's almost no fire. But that's called politics.
And another, Alexander, you want to?
No, what I just wanted to say also is that it seems to me that you are beginning to see the same kind of phenomenon in the United States as we have in Britain, where just as in Britain, we have a very divided Labour Party, divided between its left and its right wings. We're seeing the same starting to happen in the United States, where the Democratic Party, it seems to me, we've almost got a socialist wing now starting to emerge, which is very left wing. And then we have this centrist old bloc, people like Hillary Clinton and John Biden and Pelosi, and they're still there. And I wonder whether they will be able, given how divided they look, to mount a coherent challenge in 2020, because it's quite clear to me that these two wings hate each other almost as much as they hate Donald Trump. So we'll see whether or not they're able to sort of find a way of bringing the various wings of the Democratic Party together in order to mount a proper challenge against him.
Yeah, but we have to look at the other side of the equation here, which is just as important here. Yeah, the Democrats are really divided, okay? And I'll be eating popcorn for the entire primary season, watching them carry them. I'm definitely, okay, this is going to be blood sport. But the other side of the coin, guys, is that will Trump's performance as president get his people to come out and vote?
Yeah.
Are they? And I'm looking at the blue wall now. Are they going to say, is it worth for me to go out and vote for him again? Because I used to vote Democrat. What is going to happen is those people none of them might vote, not for Republican or Democrat. So Trump has to, let the Democrats cut themselves up. Let them have a circular firing squad. He doesn't really need to get involved in that, and I actually think he shouldn't, okay? Yeah. But he has to be worried about his base, to get them to come out again. That is his biggest real worry. All right. And I hope his advisors, if I was advising a campaign, okay, that's what I would tell him and say, let them bicker among themselves. They have more than enough to chew on. You don't need to add to it. And I get disappointed when he injects himself into it. It's pointless, it's counterproductive, and it shows a bit of spite, okay? And Donald Trump has reasons to be spiteful for a billion of them, I suppose, by now. But if he focuses on his base, that's taking the Rose Garden strategy, which I think would be effective for him. So we'll see. His comment about the Democrats are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, I thought was just inappropriate, unhelpful for his case.
And a follow-up super chat to that is for you, Peter, from Michael. Peter, why does no one say that Semitic tribes of Abraham and Muslims claim to be descendants from Abraham? So killing Palestinians or Muslims is the height of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, they're all Semites, aren't they? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's. I remember this, you know, at university. They've been fighting each other for thousands of years. They've never gotten. It's all nonsense. Okay, they did more or less get along for a long, long time. Excuse me. And then you have the advent of Israel, which changes the equation completely. And because I think the United States hurts its case very badly, again, I'll plug the American conservative, Israel is not an ally of the United States, and it explains very clearly. Alex, you and I talked about on Crosstalk about that. So again, you know, people like to bandy things around without any historical knowledge. And this is what we get. And of course, the AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, loves to pour fuel on this, okay? Because they're still going to get. I don't see Congress walking away from all of that money and influence when it comes to election time. There was one congressman that said years ago. He said, "You can never be too pro-Israel when it comes to elections."
All right, from Wallace, love the t-shirts I bought, guys. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Wallace. Guys, you can buy the t-shirts. The links are in the description box down below. They really are nice t-shirts, really good quality. Super chat from Rainy Steps Alexander. Russians' thoughts on mass migration in Europe.
Russians.
What do the Russians think about mass migration into Europe?
Oh, right. Well, Russians I have spoken to are absolutely bewildered that European countries have let this extraordinary thing happen to them to the extent that it has, and have been so unable to do anything about it. Because though Russia actually is a very welcoming country when it comes to immigration, I mean, there's lots of people go to Russia. It's not done in that way. Right. Peter, you want to say something? Because
yeah, I mean,
I think this is.
I see it. I used to see it really often, but from time to time, maybe once or twice a week, particularly when I'm going in and out of the metro system. It's the police talking to someone, looking at their papers. And when they're looking at the papers, the guy that they're holding, he knows the score. He's going home. He's going home. Okay, there's not going to be a tent for you. There's not going to be a detention for you. We're not going to get an interview from you. You're not going to get a lawyer. You're here illegally. You're going home immediately. Do not break immigration laws in Russia. You will regret it. And they'll put you in a database, and you won't probably even get here legally the next time. Okay, they take it very seriously. It's not warm and fuzzy at all. It's clear you're violating the law. Having said that, Russia is the second country after the United States that accepts immigrants every single year, but you have to do it legally.
Legally, exactly.
And they, look, I mean, right now it's melting. So winter is coming to an end. And now you have these huge piles of snow, which yesterday it rained. So you know what it is now? It's an iceberg. And you have migrants from Central Asia with shovels and picks, breaking it away, throwing it in the street so it can melt and go away. That it's all around me right now. They work. They're paid. It's legal. They pay taxes. They have sorted it out. It's not a problem because they have a legal system that works on immigration.
And I would add also, they have proper control of their borders. I mean, this is something that, I mean, they have a proper border guard service, which is very efficient and very, very functional. They have the longest borders in the world, and the kind of thing you see on the Mexican border with the United States, with thousands of people crossing, and the United States government unable even to build a fence, it seems, let alone a wall, to stop this thing. That just would not happen in Russia. I think, as I said, when Russians see these things, they shake their head and they just don't understand it at all. And they ask themselves, what kind of countries let this be done to them in that kind of way?
Alex, Christopher, you and I talked about it before. Remember, I think it was either Spain or Italy. Remember there was that clip where these migrants just got off out of a small boat and walked right onto the beach, just kept walking. And that was played on Russian television. And people were saying, what? Nobody stopped them? How did they get there? They were just absolutely mystified. Because, I mean, don't you control people coming into your country? And I just said, this is what you get with the globalists, these neoliberals. That's what you get. Because they might be voters one day.
Exactly. All right, we're approaching 2 hours. We'll get going for about another 10, 15 minutes, and we'll answer the remaining super chats and the remaining questions. Peter from Frederick R. The differences in ideology, politics, and cultures between the American coastal states and the flyover states are becoming huge, almost irreconcilable. Is a breakup likely in the future?
It's not inconceivable. Because not only are they different, they can't even talk to each other now. And it's getting worse. You know, I'm always angered when MSNBC and CNN says, Donald Trump is a dog whistle for racism. No, CNN and MSNBC are dog whistles. They're the ones that are inciting people. Donald Trump is not the most eloquent man. I think that's an understatement, okay? But I don't see him as being a dog whistle. I see the reactions, overreaction, and misinterpretation, intentional misinterpretation of what he has to say, inflaming passions. And I blame the media more than anything else for this, and it's only getting worse. I mean, when what I see, and usually I'll be really honest with you, Mike, what I see of CNN these days are clips that Tucker and Laura and Sean plays, because I don't want to waste my time watching that garbage here. But it's these liberal media outlets that they're the ones that are picking a fight. I mean, they have no interest in reaching out and having dialogue whatsoever. And I hate to admit it again. Maybe I'll just kind of put it on, on my screen here or right behind me. Kavanaugh. Don't underestimate the impact that the ramifications of that. And Trump has to tell his supporters when they go to the polls, he should remind people how they insulted common sense and you and the law, because all they want is power. They're not interested in social justice at all. They want power, and they want to shut down free speech. Absolutely. They want to muzzle. And unfortunately, when I was growing up, corporate America was always very careful to stay away from politics because they didn't want to damage their brand. Now we have the exact opposite. Nike and Gillette and all this, they're actively supporting this social justice warriors movement, which I think is a disaster. And of course, the media, because they are of this ilk, probably never met a conservative in their life, goes along with. But this, you have this media, you have the liberal corporate world, and you have social media, and it's all and of course the political left. That's this toxin that is all together, and it's very, very potent, and it's very, very hard to confront. And we've already mentioned the Benedict option here, which I think, if people are aware of it or not, that's what a lot of people are moving to. They instinctively want to go there, and I think it's going to happen.
Okay. Excuse me. Supersonic Cat, great long sleeve t-shirt. Love it. Thanks. Okay, great. We're happy you like the long sleeve t-shirt. They are nice. Duran shop.
Are there Duran bow ties?
Well, we can make some. We'll talk to our supplier. And see if we could get those out. Alexander, a super chat from Pegwood's fan. An update on Syria. When will Idlib be liberated? When will Erdogan come to his senses?
Well, I gather that there's already some sort of joint operations now being planned and carried out, so we'll see. I gave a prediction I think it was in our last program, that I think that by the summer it will all be over, and I stick by it. I think we are definitely heading in that direction, and I think that the situation in Idlib, when that is resolved, we will see that happen in conjunction with some kind of resolution in the Kurdish areas also. And I predict that by the end of this year, the war in Syria will be over.
So let me give my answer in a slightly different way. When will Erdogan decide? When will he come to his senses? The answer is simple: when he has to, and that moment is coming soon.
Yeah.
All right, Alexander, a super chat from Penguins fan. Another one, Nord Stream pipeline. What's going on with that? And Alexander, can you also chime in a little bit about Serbia and Kosovo? It is connected to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and there are tensions that are brewing there. So if you can give a quick answer there, and we'll get to the remaining super chats and close out the live.
Right, quickly on Nord Stream 2, I gather it's 70% complete. It's expected to be coming on stream at the end of this year. The Germans seem to be absolutely committed to it. I think some of the latest maneuvers by the United States and Ukraine to try and stop it happening have not only failed, but they've strengthened German determination to see this thing through. So I think the Nord Stream 2 will take place. And as I said, I think we will see it happen this year. There have been attempts to use the European Commission and the European Union to try to regulate it by bringing it under European Union control. And very interestingly, the Germans basically said, well, we're not going to completely go against that, but we are going to make absolutely sure that any regulation that is carried out on Nord Stream 2 is carried out by Germany. And the Germans have made very clear that they're going to stick to their deal with Russia. So I think we're going to see Nord Stream 2. Now, the other side of this are the pipelines that the Russians have been building through Turkey. That's Turk Stream. It's now there's now a definite commitment from Serbia to have it extended to Serbia. So we're going to see a parallel stream of Russian gas coming in through Europe from the south. And you're absolutely right in saying that a lot of these tensions that we see with Kosovo and with Serbia are partly, I am sure, intended to make that Nord Stream, that South Stream, if you like, that new revived South Stream pipeline through Bulgaria and Serbia and perhaps Greece, to make that more difficult. Kosovo is a complex issue. Well, some people would say it was a complex issue. I consider Kosovo to be a province of Serbia. It has been broken away. There have been attempts by the Serbian government to come to some kind of an arrangement with the people in Kosovo to swap territories. That's not gone down well in Serbia at all. It's not gone down well in Kosovo either. And as we've discussed many times on these programs, there is growing tension in the Balkans, with the situation in Macedonia not good, with the situation in Bosnia not good, and the desire by some people to obstruct the construction of these Russian pipelines and to prevent Russian pipeline gas entering Europe from the south. That is undoubtedly a factor in play. My own view, however, is that these pipelines will be built, consolidating Russia's position as the dominant supplier of gas to Europe.
Okay, and we'll finish out the live with these two last super chats. For Peter from Osama, with Trump doubling down and keeping troops in Syria, hasn't he lost a small portion of his base?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. And it'll be used against him during the campaign because, as I've said probably in every single live podcast that we've done, is that Trump really takes seriously his campaign promises, and he's going to be seen as fumbling this one here. It shows his lack of either attention, interest, or power when it comes to these issues here. My sense is what has won him over to change his mind or to keep his decision muddled is that there are very serious plans, very bad plans directed against Iran, and I think he was convinced to moderate his position because the bigger picture of Iran is looming. And I think we should all take that very, very seriously. Okay, look at all of the people around them. They all have one single thing in common: they're animus towards Iran, and they see that Trump is their puppet president. And I hate to say that, but I think it's true now. When it comes to foreign policy, he'll do what they're bidding, and I think they see this as a moment.
All right, and from Penguins fan Peter, I'm ashamed of my PM Trudeau and didn't like the one before him, Stephen Harper.
I didn't either.
There you go.
Nor me.
Well, you know, the thing is, I mean, I'm not an expert on Canadian politics, okay? But I mean, when Trudeau pops up, I tend to pay attention here. But it seems to me that, you know, as an American, you know, a late middle-aged man, there was always a real soft spot for my generation of Americans, because the Canadians usually got things right, okay? And they were moderate, and they were considerate, and tolerance in the right way. And I look at these clowns like Trudeau that have screwed that all up in the name of ideology. Okay, and I think that, you know, now, you know, Canada wants to get involved in forced regime change. This Lima group that they talk about, oh, that is, you know, Canada's, you know, that's their invention. I mean, they got their coalition of the willing to start meddling around in the hemisphere. So the Canada of today is the Canada I can barely recognize. I never would have thought that, you know, the governmental forces would go down the path of forcing them to say things, enforced speech. That is just has nothing to do with our judicial tradition whatsoever, and our understanding of, you know, you can go to the Magna Carta to the Bill of Rights. I mean, this has never been part of our tradition. We're forcing people to say things. That is such a departure, and Canada seems to be leading the way. I mean, it really is turning, you know, Pol Pot would be proud. I'm sorry, but he would be proud. He says, yeah, you get them to say that, and then they're yours.
All right. American Rebel, thank you for your super chat. That'll be the last super chat of the day. And for Constantine, yes, we'll do a video on the Cyprus gas reserves, because they do affect, they are connected to the Nord Stream 2. Okay, a couple more super chats just came
real quick, because I got to get ready.
Real quick, guys. Scott Bennett, yes, we could talk about the Silk Route. British politicians should have asked us first, in my opinion. We'll talk about that next live show as well, so put a pin in that question. Penguins fan, do you think NATO forces will blow up the Nord Stream pipeline? Guys,
no.
No.
I think for them to do a thing like that would create such a crisis in Germany that it might be the one thing that might even make some people in Germany question the whole idea of staying in NATO. That's not going to happen. I mean, they will use sanctions. They will do everything they possibly can to stop Nord Stream 2, but that kind of thing isn't happening, no.
And Peter, the last super chat is for you from Michael. Can you guys please talk about the real definition of Semitic and spread the word? Peter, I really want to see you do a video on a show on it on Crosstalk.
Okay. Well, that's I have my own forum, and I'll sneak preview. What we're going to do is I want to talk about pitching propaganda, and the focus will be on Venezuela. But basically, the whole litany of ways the United States gets itself into wars through propaganda. You know, we can start to the Spanish-American War in 1898. You know, the Tonkin Gulf resolution, all these things. I want to talk about, you know, Saddam's in the incubators in Kuwait. You know, this how the media manufactures a war narrative. That's what we're going to do tomorrow.
All right, and Silvio's final question after your comment, Peter, is who are the actors articulating against Iran? Exactly which guys do you think these are?
Well, the Washington consensus. It's broad and it's deep, okay? And if you like the idea or not, you got to get on board or else you'll get sanctioned, okay? So, yeah, it's the U.S., the UK, obviously Israel and Saudi Arabia. These are the main actors, and they have many actors following them in their wake.
Right. Iran has no friends in the political elites of the United States and Britain. They're all united against it to a greater or lesser degree.
Okay, and on that note, we will end live chat number 29. Thank you, everyone, for your super chats. Thank you to everyone who participated in this live chat and for your questions. Thank you to everyone who has bought a shirt. We're really happy that you like the shirts as well. Don't forget, guys, go to the Duran clips. It's the link is in the description box. We're going to get these videos out tomorrow and on Wednesday as well. We'll get the 20-25 videos from this live chat, and we'll put them on that channel. So subscribe to that channel as well, and you'll get the best of this live chat to watch over the week. Peter, what are you looking at this week in the news?
The issues surrounding Venezuela, I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by the Glenn Greenwald article that Facebook wouldn't allow me repost.
All right, and Alexander, what are you looking at this week?
The overwhelming subject
beside the Tuesday vote for Brexit.
Beside the Tuesday vote for Brexit, good question. Actually, I think that we have to keep an eye on the US because there are growing rumours that Mueller's report is about to come out. There was some talk that it might be in a week's time from now. We will see, and I mean, I think that's going to be a big event because it might not be in itself a very informative report. But we will see what the political consequences.
But the interpretations of it will be interesting.
Will be very, very interesting, extremely interesting indeed. And I think that is going to be a very big event. But we will see. I mean, Algeria is a very important country to keep an eye on. Venezuela is a very important country to keep an eye on, and of course France.
All right. Alexander Mercouris, the Oracle of London in London, via his cell phone, his mobile phone today. Do people even say cell phone anymore?
Well, I don't know. Never have done here in Britain.
Yeah, via his mobile phone. Thank you very much, Alexander. And from Moscow, the one and only Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for taking part in this live chat. We hope you have a really good week. Take care. Be safe.